At the start of this week, I decided to pick up my M4 iPad Pro, which I don't use often enough, and use it as my main device of the week. I wanted to use it as much as possible. And having spent the last week with it, it reminds me that it still frustrates me. And in many cases, it's still slower than the Mac. I'm David, and this is D-Talking iPad Pros. I think part of the reason for me picking it up this week was I realized it'd been sitting on the side of my desk in the studio and I just hadn't really used it. Certainly not since iPadOS had come along. I'd played with it, but I hadn't used it properly, not in earnest. And I wanted to give it a really good go. I wanted to see if the improvements to the interface, the improvements to multitasking, and the improvements to iPadOS made it more usable. And I really wanted to be in that iPad camp. When I see somebody using an iPad, it just looks creative. It looks, I don't know, as if it's just a better way to work. That's how it looks. But in reality, I still can't get my heart into it. And I find that so frustrating. If it can't win me over, somebody that wants to like it and wants to be won over, then I think the iPad has got problems. Now, like in previous videos recently, I'm not going to clutter this up with B-roll and meaningless shots of the iPad because we all know what the iPad looks like. We all know how powerful it is, and we all know the speed of the USB-C ports on it. That's not what these series of videos are about. They're about me just sitting down and having a quick chat with you about my thoughts on the gear that I'm using and opening up a conversation with you to see if it's similar to the experiences that you're having. So my week outside of video editing is actually fairly simple in many respects. A big part of my week, a very big part of my week is centered around writing. So I start off writing in something called Ulysses, which is a Mac and iPad only writers app. I write in that because it sends it and processes it straight through to WordPress. And from WordPress, I then send that to my website, talkingtechandaudio.com. And from there, I can copy the link and place it into Medium. And from Medium, that's where I earn a living from writing. So the process starts off that I'll think about this video will eventually be made into a story, repurposed content. Everybody does it. And I certainly use that all of the time. So the process that I use, as I say, I start writing in Ulysses. It's a markdown app, so it's very much centered on writing. And it obviously doesn't make the M4 iPad Pro. Mine's the 1 terabyte version, by the way, so it's a well-spec'd out M4 iPad Pro. Clearly, that doesn't make it break sweat. But the problems that I had were, well, first of all, with Grammarly. Now, that's an app that I think every writer uses. It does what it says. It checks my grammar, it checks my spellings, it checks punctuation, and I'm in context. So there's no AI per se involved. It's all of my words and writing and thoughts, but it's just checking me over before publishing. I've got it for the iPad. I've paid for it for the iPad. And it's frustrating because on the Mac, as you write, Grammarly checks and corrects. With the iPad, using the official iPad keyboard, I've got the £300 odd keyboard on there. You have to go to settings on the keyboard, the little globe icon. You have to initiate Grammarly to work. It runs some checks, and then you can go back to writing. So you kind of have to break it. The whole idea of Markdown is that you don't get interrupted. And on the iPad with Grammarly, you're doing nothing but getting interrupted, unless I've misinterpreted how it can be used on the iPad. Now, again, I can only talk about the things that I'm using, and I hope that resonates with you and opens a conversation with areas you're finding difficult on an iPad, because I'm just giving you my week's feedback on some of the frustrations that I've had. So Ulysses works okay. Grammarly, not only is it slower to use on the Mac, when I throw it on the iPad, but when I throw it back to the Mac, Grammarly finds a whole host of other corrections to make as well. And this is something I was going to mention later on, but I may as well mention it now, is that I think a lot of the frustrations that I have with the iPad are down to the app manufacturers. Still, after all of these years, are down to the apps and the app manufacturers. So with my writing, once I've got it written and spell checked, then I have to put in hyperlinks. That's easy enough done because now the windowing on iPad, that's simple enough done where I can copy URL from an article and then put that URL into my story. That's great because writing likes external links. I do all of that due process. But then the area it really slowed me down on with photos. So with my blogs on Medium, or you can see them on my website, there's photos throughout the course of the story, just to break it up, to bring some, I don't know, just to bring some visual content to the stories. On a Mac, it's really straightforward. Same process as on the iPad, but it just seems much quicker on a Mac. So what I do, I'll take a photo, I'll put it into Lightroom first if it needs any coloring up. Most of my photos are shot raw. So I'll color it up in Lightroom. Then I'll take it into Photoshop to reduce the file size down to a manageable size for web use. And from there, I'll put it into a folder and then drop it into Ulysses and put it into the story. It's actually quicker than it sounds. On the Mac, certainly, it's super quick to do. On the iPad, although it was the same process, because everything just seemed to take longer to do. It was harder to find the files that I needed in the folder I placed into the downloads folder in the dock, and then to drag into the story, into Ulysses, than it is on the Mac. And that brings me round to another app that I use all of the time, is Lightroom. As you know, I'm a photographer as well as a writer and making videos here on YouTube. So I use Lightroom every day of the week. Now, when I set out this week, and part of the day I spent on the train, I thought, this is going to be perfect. I was going up to London. I was finding some more slow horses scenes, actually, to shoot pictures at. So on the train coming back, I thought, great, I can sit and edit in Lightroom. I really wanted to use the Apple Pencil. I'm not an artist, so I thought this is going to be where the Apple Pencil comes into its own for putting masks on, for making adjustments, making really fine granular adjustments. But even then, I found that Lightroom is missing some features that are on the Mac. For instance, in masks in Lightroom, and this is particular, but I say, I'm just talking to you about some of the frustrations I found. In the masks in Lightroom, you can, on a Mac, go to something called landscape, and it just scans the whole picture. It will find architecture. It will find artificial ground. It will find foliage, trees, flowers. It will find people. It will find sky. It will make separate masks for you, and then you can adjust those different masks to get the look that you want. It's brilliant. It is a great, quick way of working. But on the iPad, that's not there. Now, Adobe works really well and very closely with Apple. So if Adobe can't get things right, that makes me worried about other apps. And that was a real frustration because I got so far on retouching a photo that I'd shot that day in London. And the whole idea was that the iPad should make me portable. All I took with me that day was the iPhone Pro Max to shoot on, and then the iPad to do all of my work while I was on the train, emailing, researching for flights I've got coming up, and booking flights and getting visas sorted out, and then retouching photos. But I couldn't even finish retouching photos on. I still had to throw it back to the Mac. And that's not the iPad's fault, but it certainly makes using the iPad less enjoyable and less sustainable. Another app that I use every day is YouTube Studio. Won't surprise you to know. Again, this isn't a heavyweight app that I'm using. It's one of the routine, regular apps that I use every day. And it's just to highlight frustrations. If you've watched me for any length of time, you'll know that I always read your comments and reply to every comment. As far as I know, I reply to every single comment. I've never had an issue with that, and I love doing it. But on the iPad, the YouTube Studio app is really frustrating. You'll get so far on answering some comments, and it will suddenly just grey out. And I can't just back out to the previous screen. I have to shut YouTube Studio down and reopen it. And again, it's got the same issues with spell checking in Grammarly. I have to manually open Grammarly to check the spelling on the comments that I make because it'd be kind of embarrassing being a writer if I made bad grammar, used bad grammar in my comments. So I check everything before I send it. And again, that was just another one of those pinch points. And it kept coming back to this problem that everything I went to do on the iPad this week, I could do. I had to alter a logo in Illustrator. Yeah, I could do that. I could retouch the photos in Lightroom on the iPad. I could resize them on the iPad in Photoshop, but everything just took more time. And if it's taking more time, that kind of makes you wonder, why bother? Why put myself through extra pain? Yes, it's great to be portable, and yes, it's better to use the iPad than the phone for sure, but it's a hell of an expensive device to have so many limitations to it. And don't forget, as I said at the top, this is coming from somebody that wants to love it. Every time I pick it up, that super thin design, I sometimes just sit on the sofa at home and take it out of the keyboard because it's such an amazing design, and I love that. That ticks all the boxes for me, and yet I still find it frustrating to use. Without a doubt, one of the things I love about it most is that display. That tandem OLED display is beyond gorgeous. My TV, to be honest, isn't all that good. It's just an LCD TV. I get a much, much, much better picture for watching Formula One or Apple Originals series on the iPad Pro than I do on any other device that I've ever owned. And battery life, yeah, that's decent. That lasts easily, all day use. I was using it in an office environment this week in the studio for writing and all the things I've told you about, and it was easily lasting a day. But the only other intensive app that I've really tried to use on it was Final Cut Pro. And again, that falls back into that camp. Yes, I could do it, but I couldn't do the whole project from start to finish on it. I know plugins are coming on board now, and that's becoming better, but even so, you're still editing on a smaller screen, less real estate to edit on, and it's just a slower way to edit. Although Final Cut does work very well on it, it's just a smaller way to edit. Some of the things I love about iPadOS are the simple things, actually. The windowing, that was brilliant. When I was on the train this week, being able to scatter open loads of windows and just go into Expose, find the window that I wanted, or have two windows, three windows sort of open on the screen together. When I was writing and referencing and finding hyperlinks, absolutely love that. Also love the red, green, yellow traffic lights at the top. Brilliant. I love the little handle at the bottom of the apps that you can drag to resize and move things around. All of that I absolutely adore. But it came back to it at the end of the week that still the iPad isn't going to be for me. And that really frustrated me because I so want to fall in love with the iPad. I think it could be a fantastic way for me to work, but I don't know what else they can do. Is it just because I'm more of a Mac user? Am I using the iPad wrong? Help me, tell me, refresh my outlook on how I should be using the iPad to get. I don't want to use the term productivity. I can do everything I want to on there, but I want to use it better, quicker, more efficiently. And unless there's something I'm missing in the simple tasks I've mentioned to you today about photo editing, writing, and just commenting on YouTube Studio, it's a slower device to do it on than a Mac. So why would I bother to do it? So I'm glad I've spent this week using the iPad as my main device. It's reminded me I love it, but it's reminded me that it's still got its shortfalls. I love making these videos. I just sit down at the weekend and just sit and talk for 10 minutes, away from any kind of sponsorship, away from any kind of pressures I have on the business side of this. It's just me talking to you and hopefully starting a conversation with you about something that you're passionate about as I am and want to chat to me about. Get busy in those comments. Let's talk iPad. Let's see if I'm using it wrong. And hopefully one day I can actually meaningfully use the iPad without wishing that I was using a Mac. I can't wait to read your comments. I'll see you on the next video.